has the number of segments and how long they are and so forth. And how, when you want a certain circumference, you go to that. What I forgot to tell you is on the far left side of it, it'll give you diameter, and then if you go over here to whether it's a 15-degree segment or 10 or whatever, if you look to the left here in the second column, it will give you a dimension of 23 inches or 24 inches. That's the length of wood that you need to make those individual segments. And I always add like 2 or 3 inches to that just to be safe. So, does everybody understand that? Okay. We talked last week about doing segments, and this is a bowl that I mean, again, I do a lot of Indian designs. But when I start out, I make individual segments, individual pieces. So I start out on the bottom with one solid piece of maple, and then a smaller piece of, I use Wenji, and on the side of that is 2 pieces of maple that equal the same distance. So, and I do that all the way up. I maintain. You say, well, how do you get that square? If you maintain this here with your accurate cut pieces, then you will gain that. And you stack them, and I'm going to pass these around. That's that one there. And there's 2 ways of doing it. You can do that and add, in the center here, I added a piece of babinga. And I filled that gap so you have a color. Where this has blue in it, I put red. Okay, that's that. Now the other thing is that when you're using a filler, this is called inlace, and this is a turquoise inlace. It's an epoxy, and they already have it mixed up, and you add a hardening agent to it and stir it. And that hardening agent is methyl ethyl ketone. I don't know if you're familiar with methyl ethyl ketone, but it's not good to breathe. But the other thing is, if you add too much of it and you mix it up and you've got some left over and you throw it in the garbage, if you've got too much hardener in it, it's going to catch on fire. It gets really, really hot. So you have to be careful about how much you mix. So rather than using that piece there that I passed around with a bigger, thicker hole in it, if you've already turned your bowl down, as you start turning, it gets thinner and thinner. That's when you put your inlace in here. I put a piece of, it's turning, so I put a piece of masking tape on the bottom, and then I fill that in with inlace, and then after that's filled, I'll put a piece of masking tape over that, then I'll go to the next segment and do the same thing until you go all the way around. And it'll take probably an hour and a half for it to cure really well, and then you can finish turning to whatever dimension you want. So that's what this ends up to be. That's that design. And I will give you caution. This is the turquoise that I use, that I grind up. I smash it. I have a solid plate on the bottom, and then I have a tube welded on the top of that. And then I have another tube that goes down inside of it with a 3/4 inch solid piece on it. And I keep smashing it until I get dust. Then I mix that with a clear epoxy. You can buy the inlace in different colors, whether it be black or red. I've heard now though that it's almost impossible to get the turquoise inlace. That's what I've heard. I usually get it from either Woodcraft or Craft Supplies. The other thing is, now this is a ring I just showing. This is a ring that I had put a clamp on. I've taken the clamp off. This is the rings that I have run through my drum sander and gotten them flat. If you don't run them through your drum sander, and if you have gaps, you're gonna see the gaps. When you start turning, you're gonna have airspace in there. Then you've gotta go back in and make sawdust to fill it in. One of the important things, even in that, when you add that little center piece, that colored piece, and then that wood, you have to make sure that that piece you entered in there, it's not end grain sticking out. It's a common mistake. Usually this is the end grain here. This is the long piece of wood. It has to be fit in here. If you turn it around, it will be dull looking. You'll never get it to look right. It'll look pukey. And it's the same thing when you're making these things. If you put a division piece in here, if you put this in here with the end grain sticking out, it's going to look terrible. So you have to turn it like this, and you're all right. When I make pieces, let's see. When I make pieces in long lengths with maple, Babinga maple on top, I'll have a long strip like this. I don't put the clamps, I don't clamp it here and here. I clamp it between two pieces of wood so that you don't get any marring. You don't get any depressions in that, or it'll show up when you turn it. This bowl press I have here is kind of an overkill. I had pieces, so I used what I had to have it made. This is called a pony press clamp. And it goes up or down. And this here, I can adjust this bar all the way down or all the way up. And then I have additional plates that I can put underneath it. And then I have a small one. I don't know if I brought the small one. I didn't. So when I assemble, again, I use tape. So this is the round solid base that I've used, Babinga. And what I do is I center this on here. Now you can use a caliper and get equal distances all the way around so that it's in the center. Now you can, when you glue this, I just put glue on this part right here, I center it, and then I twist it just a little bit to get the glue to smear, okay? Then I let it sit. Now how long is it going to sit? It depends on the temperature outside. And then, when that sets, I'll let it sit for a while where I can't slide it. It's not completely cured, but I can't slide it. Then I put the next piece. And I do the same thing. And when you line these up, your lines cannot be, they can't be the same line go all the way down. You have to split the difference. So if it's centered here, you find the center, that's where this center point has to be on this diagonal. Can you see that? No? Sorry.
Why don't you stand on the other side of the counter?
Huh?
Why don't you stand on the other side of the counter?
Oh, I can do that too.
If you don't have a drum sander, could you run those through a planer?
No.
Tear it in.
Some people say you can. I've never had luck with it. It always wants to catch. And when you run these through a drum sander, the other thing you need to point out, it's really hard when you get the small pieces to run one single piece through because it wants to tip up. So I put back to back. I keep going back to back so that the catch on there's a weight on behind the sander that keeps pressure on this. But once you get past it, it has a tendency to lift up.
It's not.
So, like I said, these center pieces have to be from here to here, and then where this line is, it has to be in the center. Okay. And then once again, I put this one down and do the same thing. Now, you probably don't remember, this is the picture. I'm making another Apache bowl. This is the picture of how it started out on the bottom. You can see how it lays out. Once I get all this glued up, and it's not really sliding at all, then I put it underneath my pony press. And actually what I have is another round disc. It's round, and I put it underneath there, and I put pressure on this as I'm going down, because what happens is if it wants to slide at all, when you turn this, it has a tendency to want to shift it a little bit. Now the other thing you can do is clean off and put a little dab of hot melt glue on the side to keep it from shifting on each ring. Some people do that. I don't. But it's not uncommon when you start, you don't need a lot of pressure. You don't need to bear down and bear down and bear down on this. It's just a slight amount of pressure. A lot of people will have a weight, they'll put a gallon jug of water on top of it. It's enough weight. You know, you don't need 30 pounds of pressure to do this. It's really minute. So again, once again, you can raise this down, or I think I can get like a 16-inch bowl or a 15-inch bowl. I don't know what the dimension is here, but I can go up pretty high.
Paul, do you try to glue the whole bowl, all the rings at one time?
No, I do not. Depends on that. That bowl that I passed around, that one there, if you try to do that like it is, it's very hard to get into that curve. The lower your bowl is, the more your bowl flares out, it's much harder to get in there and turn that out. So I turn as I go. Like this, I'll turn all 3 rings on this. Okay? I'll set this up, I'll turn all 3 of these, and then I've got 3 more rings to put on top of this to complete the bowl.
Oh, okay, so you turn it in stages too.
I turn it in stages.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. The inlays, like I said, I see somebody. Huh?
What's the maximum amount of pieces you glue at one time?
I usually do 3, not including the base. I'll do the base plus 3. That's typical. This here is, again, I saw somebody else had a piece in here with inlays on the top of their bowl. I don't know that. This is a curly maple with the turquoise inlays in it.
Hey Jeff, we had a demo at the Hickory Club a couple weeks ago or a couple months ago, where they talked about using colored sand from Michael's and get the same effect as the crushed turquoise or that kind of thing.
I haven't used sand. I mean, my turquoise is really soft. It's softer than sand when you grind it. I mean,
Yeah, it's what he uses, and you know, he's been turning a long time. He just finds it really cheap, and he can get it at Michael's instead of going to craft supplies or whatever.
yeah.
Is that real turquoise or like a synthetic source?
What the inlace is not a true turquoise.
Okay.
It's I think it's probably plastic or whatever.
Are you saying inlace?
INLACE,
Okay.
inlace.
Inlace.
I don't know if I have a box.
They used to sell it at Klingspor's. I don't think they do anymore. I think you have to get it online or maybe craft supplies.
This is what comes in a kit. That box is empty, but you can get it in different colors. You can get it in reds and blues and blacks, and different. I buy the clear, and then I do my own coloring. Like I said, I use turquoise. I'll buy some red coral and crush it and add a little bit of coral to give it a little bit of red flakes in there. I'll use lapis, which is kind of a very, I want to call it a lavender or purple stone. I crush that and add just a little bit of that. You know, you can add whatever you want. But turquoise is really pretty easy to turn. I mean, it doesn't really dull your bit. I use carbide bits, so I don't notice it that much. But I grind pretty fine.
So I guess if you like found a pretty piece of rose quartz on your property, you could beat it up and,
Quartz?
you know, and
I don't know. I don't.
The quartz is
Not gonna use my tools to turn.
The quartz is pretty tough stuff. The other thing that I use is I use an oyster shell, or what they call a spiny oyster shell. And it gives you an ominous color in there, a little bit of white tint to it. You can mix your colors however you want. The other thing I wanted to cover today is, this is called the basket illusion, and I think you've seen it before. This is a maple bowl that I turned, and then what I did is I put it on my lathe, and then I used a D-way tool, this is a D-way tool. It's an 1/8 inch, and as it's spinning, I would push it in a little bit till I got a groove, and then I'd move it to the next one. And you gotta kind of rock it to make it round, and then you go to the next one. And you do this all the way around. Get that all the way around. Then, after that's done,
Paul, can you pass that tool around?
Sure. yeah. D-way tools are absolutely the best. I mean, you can't find a better finger tool like that. They're sharp, they're not cheap. I think that little piece right there was $55. And that's without a handle. I do not use a handle on it, I just use it on the rest as it goes around. Now I can't.
So doing the basket illusion, one of the things I have learned is you have to have a really good piece of tight grain wood, because you get 75% of the way through, you start having some tear down on those 100 beads.
Now, is the lathe spinning when you're putting the beads in?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Slow or fast?
I didn't know if you were indexing or.
You index on the next part, we get ready to talk about the turn of beads, you don't.
Now I can't, this one won't fit on this lathe. I don't think. Yeah, it might. It doesn't, it'd be the wrong size, but this is an inch and this is 360-degree pattern around here, degrees. And what I do is I take the chuck off, and then I slide this on, and then I put the chuck over that, and that holds my piece. After I do that, this sits on the I have to move this out way back. But I turn that, it's hard to, let me hold one out for it long.
Bill, if you take the chuck off, that'll put it on there.
Oh, that's all right.
Oh, right.
I didn't know. Okay, that one's, this is not the right size, it's got some slop in it, but what I do then is I take all this off, and then as the bowl, I have a pointer on my lathe that comes out, and it comes out and has a pointer over here, so I see how many degrees I'm moving this, okay? And then I'll do it here, and I'll go all around the bowl, And then I'll move it 5 degrees and do the same thing, all the way around. And then once that's all done in pencil, then I take that off, and then I use a wood burning tool. I don't know where it's at. You can see the lines on it. The wood burning, no, I use a wood burning tool on here to mark the vertical lines. Then all of this other black stuff here, you can burn it. I use black ink, and I get that from, I think it's Cheap Joe's Art Stuff in Boone.
Great store.
Great source. He has all kinds of colors. I mean, you can do it in reds and browns and blues and different colors, and that's what I use. And then I just spray this with a flat matte finish.
Can you pass that over around?
This one? Yeah. You can come up with your own pattern. That's just one that I came up with to make it look like an Indian basket.
How do you put the ink on? Use.
Huh?
How'd you put the ink on? Do you have?
They're really fine. They're really fine pieces. You got to just keep going back and forth. You can buy a really fine brush on the whiter pieces and use the black Indian ink and do that. But on the smaller, thinner pieces, I just use my pen to do that.
About 0.05 millimeters, it's small.
I wonder if you could use Prussian blue engineered ink. That'd be pretty cool. You know what I'm talking about?
I would suppose you could use it. I don't know.
But you have to be careful, it has to be a ink that's not gonna bleed, right? Because
Yeah, you can't. You don't want it to bleed.
Oh, yeah.
Prussian blue don't dry.
It doesn't.
You can get the spray stuff that does, but the little tube isn't. It stays actually.
So from experience, he probably spent 2 or 3 hours doing just the burning part, right?
Maybe more than that. I mean, I have a wood burning tool. You have different bits in it. They're really fine, and you can adjust the rheostat on it to the temperature you want. But you got to just sit there and go very slowly to each line. If you get it too hot and push down, then it'll leave a burn mark. You don't want that. You just got to. And I'll sit there and listen to TV, and not watch TV, but I'll listen to TV or a radio, and just do that in my chair. It takes a long time, and the bigger the plate you have, the more and more time it takes.
So the bit basically mimics that chisel that he's sitting around.
Oh yeah, and when I don't burn on the grooves that I make, I go to Lowe's and I get black Formica chips that you get for samples for your Formica countertop, and I just push that in that groove and I get it hot and it burns it. And then I move to the next groove and it burns it. You just keep going. And then eventually the Formica chip gets down, you just got to, keep rotating it. But that's what leaves the burn marks in that.
Jeff, I'm not trying to be a smart aleck, but or were you an engineer?
No.
Well, and the reason I'm asking is because the math on this stuff just drives me crazy. And so how long did it take you to learn all this?
30
Right
years.
now.
He's not done
I
yet.
mean, I'm 78 and I've been doing it for probably 20 years.
Yeah, I mean, seriously, I mean, this stuff just boggles my mind.
I mean, I know algebra and calculus and all that, and I can, huh? and I can figure out volumes, and ratios.
Add creativity to that in your home. Yeah.
But really, I get a lot of my ideas from Ray Allen's book. And if you go through here, you'll see, and I've done several of his pieces. And I mean, he's great. He's passed on, but he's probably the top wood turner that I've seen that I I truly, truly enjoy. He does things that are just amazing. There's one picture in there where he's made a bowl on a lathe, and he's inside the bowl. He's inside the bowl finishing it. And that picture is in there towards the front end of it. But there's a lot of things that he has in there. It will give you some ideas and give you some dimensions. I've tried some of his dimensions, the way he's done it, it's not worked for me, so I've kind of altered my own.
Chip, I totally get your point, but the segmented stuff, it requires a level of precision that's not necessarily fun to me.
Yeah,
It seems to turn engineer people on, so have at it.
well, that's why I asked, and, you know, knowing algebra and so on, I really sucked at math, so.
Well, geometry's better off. You're better off with geometry on this.
But Chip, really, once you get into it, I think it's just intimidating to start with. But,
Yeah.
A lot of it, looking into it, it wasn't that different.
I actually started out turning pins. I did it. I went down to Texas. They had a
Well,
little wood shop.
it's the gateway drug.
And I kind of like turning the pins, and I kind of like that, so I made a whole bunch of pins and sold them. And then, one of the biggest thing is, when I got into really better wood turning, I went to North Carolina State University at their Woodturning Guild. And the people that they have there, I mean, some of those guys are way above my league, and you get more and more knowledge.
Chip, I like what Mark Twain said about math. He said there's lies, damn lies, and statistics.
But,
Just remember, every circle has 360 degrees, no matter how many parts you divide it.
That's an interesting thing, this guy talking about how do you divide that circle and get it into different things. One article I read, he said, it's simple. He said, I just take, if I'm 75, I find me a piece of measuring tape that's 75 millimeters or centimeters long, and I make it into a circle, and it's, at that point, I've got everything divided. I just have to connect the center point to the line. You don't have to worry about the mass, you don't have to worry about the angles. Just think about the circumference, just get you a string that's that length, put it in there.
well, it's like, you say you cut it 15 degrees, you're doing 12 segments. 12 times 15 is 180, and you double that, so then you've got a 30 degree. You're sitting here at 30 degrees versus the 15, then you've got 360.
Oh, well.
Does that make sense?
Well, you just take a 30-degree triangle you get and taking a little bit of geometry and split it in, you got your 15-degree angle. It's easy enough with predetermined stuff.
It's the same thing. If you have 24 segments,
It's easy enough, the hell you say.
if you take 24 segments times 7.5 degrees, that's the same thing.
That's 7.5.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, 7.5, and then, yeah. 7.5, yeah.
But if you go back and watch our video from last time, you'll see he's got little jigs that make all that a whole lot easier, right?
Yeah,
Wedges and whatnot.
yeah. The wedgie board, I call it a wedgie board. You have different wedges in it to give you all the different degrees, and it's right on the money, right on the money.
Buy a CNC machine.
Well,
That's cheap.
is that it?
All right, thank you, Paul.
Yep.
Being often here that he is, asked me here a while back if I'd do a demonstration on lathe maintenance. I said, no, but I'll do some talking about it and get the crowd to get in on the discussion. Because I know there's guys here that have done it more than I have. But he said, well, I got one over here that we use in the demonstration. You come practice on it. So this one has already been cleaned one time. But anyway, actually, the lathe is probably the most expensive thing that most of us are doing wood turning. I know Dennis just bought a new one the other day, and several of you got new, several of you got old, and some of you got used ones. And so It's a whole lot more fun though if the lathe, if everything moves real slow and smooth like it should. On this one, oh my. And doing this stuff, what I realized is, first of all, go to your user's manuals. If you don't have a user's manual, or if you don't like reading, get on YouTube, because just Google the make and model of your lathe, and you can find out pretty much everything you need to know about it real quick. And, but one of the first things I'm going to start with is Morse tapers.
Is it currently plugged in?
What, you have to plug in.
Okay.
But you stick your finger, if nothing else, several times a week when you're using this thing, you need to check these Morse tapers. Both of them have a little bit of a ring in them that need to be cleaned out or something, but you can get them something with the rings to clean those Morse tapers out. It's not bad, but it is something that you can do, but it needs to be checked.
They make these rubber, like number 2 Morse tapers.
Yeah, just go in there and clean them out. And what I normally do is just take a wooden dowel with a paper towel and go in there and clean it out. And if you need to, use a little bit of WD-40, but then clean it out good so that more taper still will seat and lock down good. While you're doing that, look at the threads, particularly on this spindle head. Here, those of you that turn a lot in reverse and you have to run that set screw in, if you're not careful, it'll really booger your threads up on this thing. So watch it. When you're cleaning that, remember to clean the threads inside your chucks. I've got a couple of toothbrushes laying on a shelf right behind the lathe. It's easy enough to go in there once or twice a week and just grab that toothbrush and run around those threads. And the other thing is when you're putting, particularly if you're new at turning, is if you've got a big block of wood and you're trying to mount it with a face plate or this on here, put this on there and turn it by hand. Don't try to put this on it with a big chunk of wood and lock that hips lock down. That's the easy way to cross thread these things. So put this on first and use it. But doing the maintenance on it, since we don't have a place to lay everything, when I cleaned this one, I found a tremendous amount of dust and dirt on the quill. And so one thing I found out real quick, guys, several things you need to have in your shop. I know most of you don't like going to Harbor Freight, but get you one of those little magnetic trays. And when you take these set screws out, put them in that metal tray so you don't lose them.
Because you probably have sawdust on the floor, right?
A little bit of most of those. If you're like me, it is hard to find them once you drop them in there. Remember, the threads on these things are reverse threads, so it will back out on you, but just want to show you that it is critical to get in there. A lot of the small lathes, this fits in a keyway in the quill. It also is what locks the quill down. So it's easy to mess up the threads, or not the threads, but the sides of this keyway. So we found this one, when I got it, it wouldn't auto eject. So one thing I wanted to do was to try to get it so that we could auto eject on it, and we did after we cleaned it. It was easy enough to do. Back pretty well out. Try not to drop that set screw. You see, this threads on this were pretty well corroded when I took it off, where it had not been cleaned, and you can see there's paper towels. Turn one off, Jay. And so I went ahead and covered those up again. I took a toothbrush, cleaned those off pretty good, and, that's one thing that, with my bigger lathe, it's easy enough to take the quill out, just move the whole thing up. But these, when you take it out, first thing to do is check this edges of this groove, because when you're tightening this down, it's awful easy if this thing is off center, ain't at all, to mess up those edges. If it is, just go ahead and take your file it down a little bit. And when you put it back in, go ahead and make sure that you get it lined up. And it's,
Feel with the, I find it with all the little hex head set screws, you know, they tend to get dry and built up. And if you take your air gun and blow them out good, your Allen wrenches will see the whole thing.
yeah, I'll take it. And that's what we did with this one. When we started, we tried to blow out all those things to start with. And the other thing is, several times, check most of the tool rests, cast metal, they will nick. Every time you get a catch, it's going to leave a nick in this thing. So if it feels rough, go ahead and take your file, that file, run over that thing from one end to the other. Don't just worry about the nick, but go from one end to the other so you got a continuous smooth surface on that. And if you've got a newer lathe, you may have gotten a hardened steel tool rest with it, or at least the rod that goes on top of it. Those are a lot better. I still like these simply because I've got a place to rest my finger here when I'm running along with them. So it just depends on what you get used to. But those are the easy parts to get cleaned up. I'm not going to try to put the set screw back in there right now, but I'm going to take it back off for a second. Just say the other thing is take this tailstock off, look at the bottom of it. I find that on my big one, the lock nut will work itself just a little bit loose. So periodically I'll have to tighten it up, but this thing rides in here on the bottom of the lathe. That's what really locks it down. So when you're cleaning this bed, clean underneath that thing too. Periodically just check it. So lay that down. Then the tool rest and the banjo. I was curious, I don't know how the word banjo ever got associated with this part here. They say that the earlier one looked like a musical instrument. Did any of you guys know, or have anybody come up with that?
I've heard it called that for a long time, but I have no idea where that.
I have no idea. It just didn't make a lick of sense to me
Like
that it would be called
a
a banjo. But the same thing with to me, the tool rest, it's the key in it. Mine, it doesn't slide like it should sometimes. And so it's aggravating, but I'll take it off, clean the bottom of it, and you really have to clean in here good. You can see this one's, and it doesn't take long for them to get covered up, and then check the cam and everything under here. Again, clean this. I'm not going to spray WD-40 in here because I'm going to get it on the floor in the fellowship hall. But I'll use, particularly if I'm going to be turning green wood, I'll either put some aluminum foil or something down across this part of it, if I can remember, to keep it from wetting the bed. But it's easy to forget it, and this thing will corrode in a heartbeat after you turn that sapwood. Ken, we worked on this one, got it fairly clean, and put WD-40 on it. It was a tremendous difference in what it was before and after. I wish we had a way of measuring, particularly the tool rest, on moving it around. And then the other thing to do is you can't see it, but come in here, check these belts. It's awful easy for these grooves, and if you come up afterwards, open this lid, you can see the dust in the grooves on air where the belt's not. As much, particularly if you do a lot of sanding, you're going to get dust in here on these. I can take my big lathe and blow it out every time I use it, particularly if I've done a lot of sanding. But I found that when I checked my little one at home, I had dust in every one of those grooves, and just about all these belts are grooved. And so you know it gets in this. I just took a clean brush and cleaned the belt and everything on it, and it makes a world of difference, and it doesn't take a lot of time. Now, where I hope to get into some discussion today is what have you guys found to be the best thing to lubricate your bed with.
What I do on mine is I have a palm sander, a rotating palm sander. I use 120 grit, and I go over that and get that very clean. And then I wipe that off with a rag, and then I put Simonized paste wax on it, a very thin layer, and let that dry, and then I buff that out.
Okay.
And that works really well for me. And I do the same thing on my table saw.
Okay. Now, do you do much greenwood turning?
No, I don't. I don't.
Okay, so I think that makes a difference, because I've tried to wax, and what is some